Are you a person with a disability in BC looking for career opportunities? Whether your disability is visible or not, BC Partners in Workforce Innovation can help. We streamline the process to connect you to the right opportunity with inclusive employers we recruit for, and our referral process helps take away the fear, discomfort, and stigma of disclosure. We collaborate with you, your employer, and other supports to identify ways to remove barriers to set you up for employment success. Visit findmycareer.bcpartnerswin.org and begin to explore your career options.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to our Artist Feature podcast on Reimagine Radio. This is episode 42, as we've taken a little hiatus over the last couple months. But before we get started, I would just like to say, if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the VAMS YouTube channel. Now, today, I am joined by VAMS Program Coordinator Bryden Veinot and by longtime VAMS artist Simon Paradis.
Hey.
Welcome, gents, to the pod.
Hey.
Today, we are here to talk about the latest VAMS release, which was released last week, called Kettle For Two. Now, Simon, I'll start with a question with you. You mentioned when we were just kind of prepping for this session that this process was a little different than your usual writing process, but maybe you can tell the listeners about the lyrical content and how you came about writing the lyrics for the piece.
Well, it was interesting because usually I try to start with lyrics and then find out what the lyrics kind of internal rhythm is, like I'll write a bunch of gobbledygook and then I'll figure out kind of a pocket in the words that I like, and then I'll start forming all the words to that pocket. Mm-hmm. Then I'll start writing melody and chords to support that rhythmic phrase idea. Mm-hmm. In this, though, Bryden had built this lovely strata of underpinning tracks of bass and drums that you guys had already kind of like fully fleshed out a tune, and you needed someone to kind of put lyrics where the obvious spots would be. So it was interesting because I started with a set of parameters and I usually don't. Mm-hmm. And, you kind of, it's almost like you have to, it's like you're one of those old time guys who's like putting his ear to the ground and going, whoa, I hear there are horses coming this way. It's that kind of process all of a sudden where you're like, you're trying to be a song whisperer to what is already an existing construct. Right. And then thinking, okay, what am I going to bring to it? And so, I think a lot of the stuff that I wrote about were things that I was dealing with in my own head with regards to quarantine and inherently a lot of like the divisiveness and mutually exclusive aspect of ideas that people are dealing with right now, in terms of, anyway, I don't want to get into a political discussion about stuff, but there are a lot of things that have been going through my head during lockdown. And sort of what that must be like for a whole range of people, the process of feeling kind of like not part of your tribe anymore and feeling alienated by certain things. And so that influenced a lot of the tone of the language I was using.
Can I go back to like the first initial like start of writing the lyrics? So when you said like the gobbledygook kind of thing, like literal like gibberish, you would just like kind of flow patterns of like gibberish words, and then you would link words into those phrases or syllables that kind of came up, or
I actually try to start with as much kind of prose / poetry stuff as possible, and then I hope for there to be an elegant moment that I can actually go with as like a scaffolding. But sometimes it needs gobbledygook. But the gobbledygook approach that you're talking about only works for me if I have like a strong rhythmic idea that I want to flesh out. And then that's going to be my scaffold, is whatever the with, rutabaga thrown in as a word or something, and really you're just basically being a drummer with your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I
scrambled eggs to yesterday thing.
What's that? Yesterday,
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow! So watery on my plate today.
Now, because if I remember correctly too, and again, we probably had did we start recording this in January or February? Something around that. I think it's been actually quite a bit of time that we've been massaging this thing. But yeah, no, because I think when you came, you pretty much had the correct melody though, right? I think it would only went through like one iteration of revisions before we kind of like settled, and then I think you were tweaking words and maybe a bit of the melody, but it was pretty much the like it was there after the fact.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think, given the the harmonic structure of what was going on and the rhythm of the track, certain things worked. I honestly didn't think Fog's Beards Caught in the Trees would work musically at first. When I sang it, I was like, that's a lot of stuff to pack into one phrase. I don't know if this is going to be musical for anyone who's listening to it or not, but I'm glad it stuck because there's something very quirky about those words as neighbors. And, I love a little quirk.
I was just going to say, like, the hard G and the hard Bs are, like, so... There's, like, attitude behind them, too. So, like, you can kind of, like, dig into that phrase a little harder.
Yeah. No, I know there's the way it's delivered, you can tell that there's a certain amount of hesitation in just the delivery that's actually on the recording. Like, I don't think the singer's quite settled on that yet.
That works for the piece, though. It could be that kind of inner fighting or inner dialogue with yourself.
Honestly, what saves that phrase is having the intro be that odd time signature rock foray.
And that's what I was going to tie on to.
It's almost like you fool the listener into thinking that the clumsiness of that first lyrical phrase actually was always meant to be, because it comes on the heels of 7/8 John Bonham.
Right. Well, and that's where I was going to also touch on with that quirkiness, like, again, doing the kind of like the C section right at the beginning too, right? Like throwing that back in there and kind of doing a reverse idea.
Well, and and I think that speaks a bit to some of the ideas around anxiety and isolation that some of the lyrics are kind of bumping up against. When you don't have something that's falling in a duple time that's trustworthy, that there's not as much purchase for the listener. And anyway, I always hoped that would complement the malaise of some of the lyrics,
I was going to say that, like, before, when we only had it, like, starting with Graeme's guitar piece, just like, that's how it originally started.
That's right.
That's such a traditional start to a song, and it just followed the contour of just climbing a mountain, right? Like, the entire song, until finally it got to the peak. But I think now with the C at the beginning as well, it's almost like that oddness at the start, you're falling off a mountain just to climb it again. But the feeling of the C section at the end is, to me, feels more uplifting than the beginning, which is more like, what's going on? Like, I can't really tell what I'm feeling, like that falling off the mountain, and then you're conquering that same mountain at the end.
Well, and
I think the dreaminess of the Lydian textures also inform that same idea, that there is something strangely hopeful about the brightness of that kind of major tonality of having the sharp 11 in there,
Yeah.
Okay, that's very esoteric.
For those of you who don't know.
Yeah, right. Here, let's get into modes of the major scale today.
But yeah, no, I just like I'm kind of jumping ahead to the production and the mixing, but I think Bryden and I really came up with a really cool idea how to get the beginning, and again, still reach that peak in the C, was when it was the last round of mixing that we were doing together, but having that kind of idea, Bryden, where we were like, you're outside the door of, say, a practice space or even like a concert hall, and the closer that you get in, the piece starts to open up, and then as you open that door, that's when you like enter the room. And then again, we had that whole section lower than the peak at the end, but it really again captures that it captures the original idea of what I had for the piece, like the original like acoustic side of it at the end too, right, where you still are going, as you mentioned, that mountain, right?
When did you, so like, what, it's such a lame question, what inspired you to make that guitar piece? I know it's the most overused question ever, but like, you know what I'm saying.
I I'd gotten the 12-string guitar. It'd been on back order because of COVID for like over a year, and it like finally showed up. And I don't know, I was playing around with, I think I was playing around with changing up different keys. So I was using my capo, and I think I was actually practicing singing and playing Something in the Way. And so it was on the first fret. And I was like, oh, that's not hitting my vocal range. And again, for people who don't know that Nirvana piece, it's 2 chords. I don't sing and play normally. I thought it was a perfect way to like practice. And so I was moving it around to fit my voice. And it ended up sitting well on the 3rd fret. And so I'd just been playing a lot of stuff in the 3rd fret. And then one day that just came. It was pretty much written... pretty much written in an hour, all 3 sections. But
nice.
however, when we changed it into the 7th, that's when it was different. That was the one major change that Simon, you first gave us to, because I think I shot you off a little demo of just guitar and bass, Bryden, originally.
The timing was different originally, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we kind of like chopped it up, kind of Frankensteined the original recording until it fit the odd time signature.
And then we re-recorded. I just remember it was funny. It's one of those things when I play certain odd time signatures, I know internally I'm counting, but sometimes my brain disconnects and it's just like, I call it, the way that I like to talk about it is like circular motion, where you hit that 1, it just becomes natural to hit that 1 on the 7. Yeah, exactly. And then I just remember, because when we were recording that, I think it took a couple minutes for sure for me to just get that initial.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when you start recording the other part, it's just regular timing.
4/4, right?
So you're like, already you're thinking in 4/4, and then you have to make that switch. So
yeah.
And then can you tell our listeners what kind of 12-string you got there?
Yes, I can. For those of you who might know me, I am lucky enough to have a David Gilmour 12-string acoustic guitar. It's funny. I literally, because of this guitar, I've gotten back into playing way more acoustic than I ever would have. It's just, I've never had a 12-string, being a left-handed player. They're really rare, I find, just in general to see. But yeah, no, this thing opened up another beast in myself just to play more acoustic. And even things like playing one of my just favorite acoustic pieces is Venus and Mars by Paul McCartney, with Wings, really. But just even that is a nice simple thing to learn. You know, a lot of stuff. And of course, Wish You Were Here. Obviously, that was the first thing I played.
That was my guess, is that with the glissando in your intro that you wrote for this song, I thought, was he messing around with Wish You Were Here in that open?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's probably right, Simon, because the D, the beginning acoustic part on the 12-string is kind of what Gilmour would do for this for the first solo, even though that's played on a 6-string.
Right.
Yeah, or at least the first 2 notes.
What's your guys' take on how we use the 12-string? Like, I would say it's a little more unconventional than your standard usage of a 12-string, right? Like, usually a 12-string guitar is in a more stripped down song, or like a little slower, more kind of open, whereas this track, it's like kind of goes hard at some points. Like it really drops in pretty heavy, and still it's the 12-string driving it, right? What's like, I'm just considering, like, what's your ideas on how we use that?
Well, it's nice not to have it just used as what I always referred to as a slightly out of tune tambourine. Is the way I've always described how 12 strings are used within production values.
All right, we're back. I had a little technical issue there. But Simon, you were talking about how the acoustic fits into this piece compared to normal conventional uses.
Yeah, it's not there just to kind of like widen the EQ perception of the listener, vis-a-vis being a slightly out of tune tambourine, is I think how I described it before.
Yeah.
You know, like it's usually used as just like a sonic reinforcement of sections and not necessarily making its own statement on its own accord, unless it's like the intro to Here Comes the Sun or something like that.
Right, and it's
although is that a 12 string or not?
Yep. The first one is, yeah. I think.
I didn't want to speak out of turn. That would have been very embarrassing. And it'd been like, there's no 12 string on that song.
Simon.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to mention about the 12 string though, is that a lot of like, it happens a lot in like modern pop music and hip hop too. There's kind of this technique a lot with certain instrument tracks or even the vocal tracks where they'll pitch it up 12 or pitch it down 12 semitones, and you'll have that doubled
Right.
octave effect, which that is what a 12 string is.
Already.
Exactly.
Right? It's already done before. So that kind of had me thinking for when we did the production, right? So like the drums, which are completely in the box, like nothing is actually, a few things are recorded live, but like just like accent snares and like a few claps,
clap
like
here and
the
there.
wood block here and there, but mostly it's like all in the box sounds, which is how like modern songs are for the most part produced now. That way you can get like that really isolated smacking kick and snare and have the hat sit on top nice without the bleed from the other drums. So that, I think the 12 string actually like helped me understand what to do with the drums, right? Which then informed the bass, and then it kind of helped along the modern feeling to it, because you can easily get sucked back with the 12 string to thinking like folk music or like
or all of a sudden everything has to sound like Boston's More Than a Feeling because there's in it.
yeah, with those harmony guitars. That's funny.
Well, and just going back to the production too, it was very interesting to see again how you have an idea for where a piece will go and where it actually ends up. Just like myself again, kind of thinking along the lines of like, oh, this could be fitting something a bit more of Simon's maybe like folk rock kind of style or something like that. And I think when we started we did a recording day here too. Well, it was probably the same day we did the acoustic. And long story short, that was when we did the bass, and then we also recorded you on the high watt, right? Yeah, and we were kind of playing around with the distorted kind of tones, and that's where it kind of really took a different lane.
There's a few guitar parts that I did, like those like higher pitched, like just descending chords, those that like it gave a different emotion to that section, right? It was like before it didn't really know, you couldn't really know exactly how you were feeling, but then that kind of told you, okay. Like, would you say that helped you like garner a feeling for writing the lyrics for that part?
I think somewhat. The guitar part that really struck me was the amount of soft detail I could hear in your left hand on that clean electric guitar track that showed up. Like I felt like it was really detailed and up close, and there was a lot going on in terms of the events of just what your left hand was doing on the fretboard. And at first when I listened to it, it kind of threw me. I was sort of like, what's going on in there? You know, it was like I wasn't sure if it was delivered by effect or like if it was something else, an event that you had manipulated in terms of production values, or if it was live played. And and it gave it this really kind of dreamy, ethereal quality, and that certainly informed where I was going.
Yeah, is it the part that's like do 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 do, kind of clean up front, kind of
clean way up front, like dry and right in front of my face? And it jumps out at times, so it's like it feels like it's trying to police the downbeat a little bit in terms of how it arrives, you know, but in a good way. I'm not saying there wasn't this intrinsic battle between the guitar part and the downbeat. It's not what I'm implying.
That technique, like the way up front dry surrounded by, I know it sounds weird, but a ton of wetness, like that's a very, like, I've always known it, but then Graeme, you definitely like helped me understand that more and more through my inundation of Radiohead.
Okay. That's surprising.
Oh my God, no doubt, like how dry a kick drum on a track can be, where everything else is like a whirling dervish of delays and verse, right?
Well, think of how your vocal comes in, right? Like it's kind of washy to start, and then sucks right into the middle, and then that's where the focus is.
I definitely, well, I wanted to go back to the guitar part too, because that particular guitar part that you were playing, that part for some reason reminded me of like production from a like late 90s, early 2000s Nelly Furtado record. Remember I was telling you that? Yeah, it was weird. There was something about it, and I was like, when you started doing it, I was like, keep going with that. Like that's money.
Well,
that part.
You know what? It might be then, because like that feeling is definitely, I agree, like that Nelly Furtado, like early pop, early 2000s kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
The I Am Just a Bird phase of her career.
Exactly. Like that's literally what, like, because I think, again, I would have been like 9 or 10 and like Z95.3 just blasting that constantly, right?
Also, the contrast between the bass in the rock sections and what the bass does in the lyric sections, for me, that contrast was fabulous. I really like the different approaches in the bass in those two sections.
Yeah, that was. I think the scaffolding was there when I sent that to Bryden, but it really pops in that C section too. That's the other thing.
It's like super like good like John Paul Jonesy stuff in the odd time signature, and in the lyric side, it's more kind of like melodic McCartney kind of approach to bass ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was and that, like, especially too, the production behind with that. I don't know how I'd call it. It's not like a growling guitar, but yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that's true. Right at for the do that part, right? Yeah. But then I also love when the guitar comes in and it's just that long bend. And I remember when you first did that, and I was like, no, the bend needs to be longer.
So I'll admit, I didn't re-record it. All I did was just warped and stretched it to make it longer. I was like, it sounds good. I don't know if I can get it as good again. But, just computers are a friend.
Yeah, I was just laughing. Push how long that goes, right, and more and more. Yeah, I mean, well, is there anything else that you guys want to say about the piece, or have we kind of concluded what we will say about it for now?
Well, I mean, it's kind of its own specific potpourri of elements, mm-hmm. And so I would think that for anyone who's listening to this podcast, auditing the actual song itself to develop their kind of own relationship with all of the elements that we've been talking about so far would probably be great. And then they would be, they would arrive to it in terms of what it is as a construct on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think, again, the very interesting thing, and this has been throughout all the pieces that we personally have written together, has been we all bring that different producer's cap to a piece.
Oh, totally. I would never have arrived at this spot on my own. So it's so refreshing to be able to work with other musicians and create that kind of synergy where elements are being complemented. And, it's like you're chefs in a kitchen, and you probably wouldn't have reached the same gumbo mix that you end up with 3 chefs throwing shit into it,
I was thinking the exact same thing, though. Like, I would never sit down and produce a record like this by myself.
No.
Like, there's too many, like, you'd have to live multiple lives to know the different, like, producer tricks and things like that we employed on this track. Like, I could be 80 years old and still not know all the little things that Simon, you might suggest, or Graeme, you might suggest to the track. So.
Oh, likewise. Totally. There's so many refreshing ideas coming from both you and Graeme that I never arrive at on my own. And it's just really constructive to kind of work by committee that way, because mm-hmm. the results are unexpected. There are so few musicians in the world that can be like writer, performer, engineer, producer.
Right. They
can wear all of those caps without the music sounding like you're looking at an aquarium with one school of fish in it.
Right. That one lens.
So I love what the variety that working as a committee has given us on a lot of these tunes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, and the one thing too, just to take not a little aside, but like the last mix that Bryden, you and I did too, I think that's when we really like nailed the production home, because I think it came back to actually listening to Outta Here and then going back to this. And funny enough, looking at a previous piece that we had recorded and put out and trying to maybe actually make it sound something more like something we had previously done, which was interesting.
Right.
Yeah. I know. Whoa.
You mean like looking in terms of continuity with regards to stuff we're going to put on one spot?
Yeah, or even just, I think I was really, really happy with how Outta Here sounded by the end of it, right? And
Me too.
And so that was like, okay, like I'd like to kind of get back a bit more to that kind of style, because I think it was, and what we were doing was just, I think it was a bit of really EQing and things like that at the very end there, right? It wasn't that much massaging, but I mean, an hour and a half went by like that, but you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
A lot going on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. It must change once you do something with a frequency on one track. You're then dealing with the fallout of like that one thing being manipulated and how it affects the way all the other tracks come through at that point. Right.
Cut 250, Bryden. Cut 250. Exactly.
Oh, the dark area of the low mids. Yes.
Exactly right. Well, gentlemen, thank you again for being on our unhiatus artist feature podcast. And again, to all our listeners, thank you for joining us today. And again, please like and subscribe the VAMS YouTube channel if you haven't. But Bryden and Simon, thanks again for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Get help discovering your career path in customer service, electronic assembly, retail, food services, and more with adult education programs at Douglas College. Our instructors work directly with you so you get the attention you need to succeed. Through work placements and one-on-one training, you'll graduate with the knowledge and skills needed for today's workplace. Learn more at douglascollege.ca/vest. That's douglascollege.ca/VEST.